As I see it, there has been three influential countries that had affected Lebanon for many decades, and the first one is, per definition, Syria. Like we in Denmark usually say that if you look at Denmark and Germany, Germany has been like the main source of the way Denmark went about looking at its foreign policies and its economical trade relations, because Germany was the big and central nation in Europe that very naturally, due to the borders, affected Denmark. Even though Denmark also could look to England and France and other Scandinavian countries and USA or bigger countries in the east like Russia, but Germany were the main influencer because of the borders, and so goes for Lebanon. It's the neighborland of Syria. That's a constructed country. There has never been such a country before the Versailles Treaty, and back to 1919, and everything goes back to there. All you want to understand about the Middle East, you have to go and dig into the Versailles Treaty and the Paris agreements and what happened in those 6 months where they went forth and back speaking about how to divide nations. Basically, all that happened in the world afterwards was based on that. Also, especially the World War II. But now, since I'm talking about my original country of birth, Lebanon, and I'm a Lebanese, born in that country and influenced by its culture, it's it's for me like to see that Syria had the biggest effect on Lebanon for many decades, and the other country has, without people really wanting to say it, is Israel, and the establishment of Israel had a big and huge impact on Lebanon and its future, especially because of the Palestinian situation that emerged from that, but also because there are borders, and the Israeli security is very much occupied with also what's happening to the north of it. And the third very influential country on Lebanon has been France. And behind France is the West. And due to the changes of roles, later it became the United States. Through Syria, we got the influence of the East, of Russia and the communist ideas, many times through what they call satellite states, like Iraq at that time, or maybe Libya. Sometimes Egypt could interfere. So it was sometimes like a battle of big nations that could maybe walk on the ground of this small country of Lebanon. But basically and mainly, it has been the source of trouble and trauma for Lebanon, and the source of many years of struggle has been Syria, because of that very difficult relation. And every politician you listen to in documentaries or history books and their biographies, they have to mention the gateway to Syria and the road to Damascus, and that everything came out of there. So what happened in Syria was 13 years after the World War II, 13 or 15 years of constant revolutions, and that's what we're gonna see now in this future that's coming. So later and after that, a small group of generals led by a guy called Salah Jadid. He was from the Alawite minority as well, and they were very much influenced by Arabic communist thoughts. It's like anti-religious Arabic nationalism in a way, mixed with some communistic ideas. That was very strange, and at the same time very authoritarian. It's like the one man, the strong man who rules. So they made a council and took over the country, and I guess that secret files will show in the future that has been with help from the nations that's interested in the stability of Syria at that time. And basically, I think the clever Israelis wanted to find a solution for this failed state of Syria that was created by the West. I'm not saying that they were failed because of themselves alone, but the change from being under Ottoman rule and change from being under an Arabic king to just being such a democratic state with a president or a leader was not something people were used to. It didn't come with the culture, so to say. The culture was like adhere to one strong leader or ruler. You had a caliph, you had an Ottoman emperor, you had a strong king, you had some general leading everything, and people adhered to that and liked that, and also reflected that in their private lives. And so to change to a democratic ideal where these generals just or the big leader was pushed out, and you had such a soft democratic government who had to talk about everything and vote and all that, that led to many revolutions in Syria, in my opinion. It's just an ethnographic explanation. That's maybe not the whole picture at all, because a lot of elements happens as well that makes this revolution happen. But then this small council of Alawite generals took over, and they were led by Salah Jadid, and with him was the guy who took over later, called Hafiz Assad. And he was from the Alawite minority, and from a family that were known in their circles. And so he became the strong man, the silent and clever and cunning strong man. He and Saddam Hussein were very much compared to each other at that time, because not even themselves knew what they were thinking. They were able to hide their thoughts even from the closest one around them. And they were very, very cynical in understanding that if you don't kill, you will be killed. And if you don't take over, someone else will. And if you don't put your friend in prison, he will put you in prison. And so when Assad was once asked why he left his dearest friend Salah Jadid to rot in prison for 18, 19 years, he said, well, he would have done the same to me. And so he went on business like that. And so it became the most influential part of the change for Syria to get under that rule. And he crushed a very strong rebellion led by the Brotherhood in the Syrian regions of Hama and Halab and Latakia and these areas, very, very harshly crushed. And these people fled, some of them to the west. And I met some of these people who were like very afflicted by that history, and their parents and families incarcerated or dead in thousands. And well, it was a fist of iron that was ruling. And so Lebanon was in the beginning like free of that, because it had its border, it has its French protection, and they were like looking to making peace with their neighbors. Also the Israelis may be behind the tables, because that's the trouble with the Arab world and the Arabic people. Sometimes they want something, but they can't say it because of some ideologies. And so people go around wanting to fight the enemy, but in truth, they are just fighting themselves and not knowing what to do with it. And that's the hard truth not many want to hear about the Arab world and the situation also in Lebanon at that time. And so when the civil war erupted, in my opinion, basically because they couldn't get to an understanding on not fighting the Israelis and not fighting among themselves, and the right wing, left wing, we had the PLO in the middle that made a lot of trouble, especially for the identity of the Christians, and the Christians wanting to fight back for the liberal and free Lebanon. And you had the Muslim groups divided left and right, and under the rule of some strong men in East and West. So I talked about that in an early video, but this is basically what happened. And so came Syria in 1976 as a part of an Arabic coalition to maintain peace in the country. But they took over, and the other Arabic leaders and generals, they went home while Syria stayed. And they stayed for security reasons, and they stayed all the way up to 2005. And in that time, it was like the whole of Lebanon were taken into a dark prison and put in the control of a very, very hard iron fist state. And he thought in Syria that he could crush the Lebanese what can you say, whistling for freedom. And the Lebanese were just used to be these whistling birds on the trees talking about politics and economics and culture. I don't know where they got it from, but it was just a mix of the cultures they were part of. They had to talk about everything, and they learned to do that without shooting each other. And they basically made it happen. But the interference of on many levels, and the problematic ideologies that came into the country made it very hard to do so. So Syria was the peacekeeping nation, and everyone who wanted to get through with anything had to go to Syria or get their agreement. That meant Hafiz Assad's agreement. And and so they controlled the country, and they had their security agents working in the country, eliminating everyone who opposed them or said anything against them. And so people started getting scared, but it never faltered in always trying to wrestle themselves out of the hands of the Syrians. And the latest one was the prime minister who was killed in such a big incident, big bomb that went 7-8 feet into meters into the ground. The Rafik Hariri, who still tried, even he many times just went along with the Syrians and didn't want to oppose them, and nobody did after the 90s, because they could see all the hands were pointing. Everyone who died at one time or another from the 76 up to the 90s, of politicians and newspaper people and citizens or disappeared. Well, and they were from different fractions. We had a famous Druze, a famous Sunni, a famous newspaper man, and from Christian group. We had the president, several presidents who were Christians, and their sons. And things happened, and every hands and fingers pointed to the Syrians, because it was directly connected. With time, people could see the connection, even though there were no evidence. But who needed the evidence? Everybody knew. If you were a Lebanese, you would understand it's the Syrians. And if you oppose them, you will get killed, or you will disappear, or something will happen to you. So people started like going about in a new way of understanding the situation they were in, but never like succumbing to it, because when they got the chance, they revolted on the streets again, and went with the new prime minister on the Hariri at that time on a road to wrestle Lebanon free from the Syrians by help of the international community, saying, listen, the civil war is long over, and you're not gonna take this country and these people. They are resilient, and they stayed resilient to the last, even though many of them also were succumbed to the force of power that came from Syria and the people that worked inside Lebanon to do that. But as just at the moment we got rid of the Syrians, we got the Iranians, and that was another chapter with maybe similar ways of looking at politics. Well, Syria had maybe its reason to do so. They wanted Lebanon, and they saw historically, that's the reason for Hafiz Assad at least. He said that historically this was one area, and Lebanon belonged to Syria, and these splitting in small nations, that didn't make any sense. And the same idea popped up in the heads of Saddam Hussein, who went on and tried to invade Kuwait, but because Kuwait was such an important security oil-producing country for the United States, they got help in ways that Lebanon never got from the French. And if the French had stepped in with all their might and their nuclear power, and one of the 5 Security Council members in the world, and they had enormous powers, if the French maybe had the power to get through to Lebanon and to Assad and say, this is a red line, get out of the country, this is not your playground, maybe Lebanon would have been shaped in a different direction. But the weakness of the policy of the countries influencing Lebanon made things go worse, and from bad to worse, and from worse to disaster. And then we had on the other side the Israelis, who were concerned about their security, and the Arabs as a whole had like big cultural shock with the Israel. I'm going to talk about Israel and my opinion, the importance of the Jewish roots for the world and monotheism. That's my opinion, but and also for the Arabs. But that's what many can't see in the fog of war. And but that's in another talk. So the Arabs had this basically big traumatic experience with having Israel implanted in between them after 2,000 years of just like homogenized people. They were not homogen at all. The Arabs were very, very different. They were also Europeans, came through the Crusades. But like at least for the last 1,000 years, you have had the Arabs like having the area without this notion of the Israelis and Jews and the people of their background controlling the whole area, especially a holy area of Jerusalem and the area around it. And that was a big trouble. And I think also it was such kind of trauma also for some kind some of the Christians, because they have always thought this is the holy area for the Christ and for the Christians. And so everyone had to deal with this, but that had been a big shock and trauma. And so Lebanese people were also afflicted by that, that we are not friends with the Israelis per se. But this has changed, and this is going to change more and more. And the trouble is the reactionary movements, who were at the same time suppressors and dictatoric in their way of leading things, and not hesitating to kill their opponents. They worked within the limits of that country of Lebanon. So let's imagine a Lebanon who weren't under the influence of. And so I was saying that if Lebanon, imagine a Lebanon free of the Syrian influence, and maybe with the prosperity of just having peace with all its neighbors, including the neighbor to the south, and having a space for the Palestinians as well, or if that two-state solution had succeeded, or whatever they wanted to do, Lebanon would have been in a different state altogether. It wouldn't have been this failed nation. It would have built on the area of the 60s and 70s, where the prosperity and the transparency were at its height, and social services and a clean country, and people could afford things, a strong economy and production and productivity among the people. That was something to be looked up to, and people really liked in the Lebanese society at that time. But as said, the 70s, mid-70s, the PLO, the Syrians, the other nations, and Israel's security to the south all conflicted, and became all like a space for fight in Lebanon. And the Lebanese were also, of course, dragged into it. Who wouldn't? If something is happening around you, you will like take part of something, and maybe orient yourself to a new direction. So unfortunately, in my opinion, if France had been stronger and really opposed any intervenence from the Assad, but maybe there have been some secret talks, and maybe the countries surrounding Lebanon thought that this strong guy could solve everything by putting Lebanon under his rule and expelling the Palestinians, and putting down the Christian right-wing rebellion, and just containing both the Sunnis and the Shiite in one. And so it will become part of the big Syria. Maybe that is what some secret documents will reveal in the future. I don't know, but I can just guess and imagine how things would have worked at that time. And maybe that's why he got all the support to stay in there, and he got the green light, because if he hadn't, we know how nations work. It's the stronger nations that mostly dictates how weaker nations go about their policies. And even though he were in Syria were like more turned towards the communist system and the socialist system of the Soviet Union, he would have to understand through back channels that this is a red area and don't go there. But that didn't happen. So this small, beautiful, chirping bird of the Lebanese cedar and countryside, well, yeah, has sometimes been lost. And that's my opinion on it when I look back on who I am and where I was raised, and what kind of dynamics had surrounded the situation we have been living in and raised in, and how things would have been different. And all that brought me to Denmark, like it brought others to Australia or Canada. There are many Lebanese living abroad. They say half the population is somewhere in the world, having economics and businesses, or just living there, working. So it's a very known minority who had produced also several milliardaires and a lot of millionaires and a lot of companies, and people with Lebanese background have been part of Australian and Latin American societies also for decades, and that makes it a small but in a way strong nation, and with a big voice, bigger than its size. But and that's the quality of the human. If you can raise the humans to such qualities of understanding its role and freedom and work, and that will bring it to a lot of productivity. I'm not saying the Lebanese are the most productive. They also like laziness and sitting in the sun and bathing on the beaches, by the beaches in the sea, and having good time with friends and all that. It's not because I'm saying it's the most highly efficiency level that we had in Lebanon. There's also some kind of Eastern and Southern mentality upon them as well. But charming and at the same time charming, well-spoken, easygoing. People liked them and liked their ways. And as one of my Christian friends said, he was a visitor in Lebanon for several months after he had to run out of Iran because of the revolution that happened there. He's a Danish old man, and he told me he was once driven by a Druze driver through some countryside in Lebanon, and he whispered to him when they came to a Syrian post, because there was always posts, what can you say, soldier posts all over the place in the country. They stopped people and harassed them and opened their trunks and asked them where they were going and all that. And the Lebanese had to deal with these soldiers and these people. Like my family, we lost our house because of them. I remember my father, he took me with him to go up to our place. It was filled with soldiers. He wanted to get some of his basic stuff. And I don't know why I was with him at that time, but he had many trips to that place of ours. So yeah, it was a traumatic experience. But that Druze driver told my friend, we hate the Syrians, something like that. And it's not because we hate the ordinary Syrians. They were also suppressed. But what they mean is the system. We hate this suppressive system of the Syrians and the Syrian soldiers, not educated, suppressed since they were small, maybe only learned into special things. There were a Syrian elite of very well-educated people and universities that has stayed from centuries ago. So it was also a hub for education and knowledge and some kind of humanistic ideas and religious scholarships. I'm not saying it was a scientific hub like Silicon Valley or anything like that, but it was a known historic place. But if you look away from that elite, most of those 20-30 million Syrians not educated, and they come to a highly educated place where people loved art and had another way of going around and about them. And that was also a cultural meeting also for many of the Syrians, and they changed with time. I remember some of my family members, the older ones, they said that when the Syrians came, they changed later, some of the soldiers and their behavior and the way they treated the Lebanese. And the Lebanese had their maybe corruptive way of getting through to the Syrians. They could like bribe them and talk to them and maybe get friends, befriend them. And then if one Lebanese had befriended one Syrian officer, and he knew he could get some things out of it because he came from poverty and impoverishness, and he didn't have all these goods and materials and on a slow salary from Syria. So he was very happy that this Lebanese could provide a new TV and new shoes and some kind of different gifts to his life. And so this Lebanese man who could be a friend with the Syrian officer, he could help 100 Lebanese through posts and different papers and so on. So Lebanese became like also connected in the way, okay, do you know someone who could help me because my papers are stuck in that place and I need them because I need my business to go on. And then they called this guy who knew this guy, and he could get in contact with a Syrian officer who suddenly got a beautiful shirt, Italian made, and or a suit or something, or 2 tickets to the best concert that was going to be held in Beirut. And so they got things through that way. And that's how people went about. At the same time, they lived in fear and not knowing what the future will bring, and taking care not to say things they shouldn't say. And everybody said the walls had ears, so watch out what you say. And they survived. And that's the survival mood of basically every human in the face of tyranny. And I don't understand how stupidity and tyranny keeps repeating itself on people, because it doesn't bring the prosperity to the people like they think it does. And it doesn't bring security as they think it does, because people are deeply, very resilient to tyranny and to suppression. And that's the lesson we all have to learn, also the Americans and the Israelis and the Eastern countries, and everyone has to learn this lesson of, okay, suppression can bring you a little further for some time, and maybe people would bow their heads a bit and maybe lose a lot of their dignity and prosperity, but it never extinguishes people's lust to fight back or to wrestle themselves free. It has not happened yet, and it will never happen. Tell me about just one country in the hundred years that went before us, that succumbed to tyranny. Well, it happened that they took over, or maybe a general took over, but then as soon as they weakened, people revolted or got up on their feet or wanted to go back to the old ways or something like that. And that's because it's a wrong way of going about, just suppressing people instead of understanding their needs and becoming like a trade partner with them, or a cultural partner. And that's a very different way of going about. That's why everything is failing in the Middle East, because the ways the big nations have been going about suppressing. Oh yeah, we need peace. What can we do? Well, let's suppress everyone, and let's let them fight each other, and that way, well, we will have that peace we want. You won't get the peace, and neither will they. And that's a very, very wrong way of going about politics. And I'm going to talk more about that in another talk.